The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 95 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on Friday, November 26, 2021. From the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, I have the honor in speaking with an aviator that is starting his transition to retirement in the airline industry. He is a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel with flight experience in T-38s, B-52s, and the B-1B. His airline career started in 1999, flying Boeing 737s, and currently he finds himself on the A320 family of aircraft at Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on the show as an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Captain David Ortiz joins us to discuss his journey in aviation, his transition towards his retirement, and he shares a few fantastic stories along the way. Before we push off the gate, I wanted to say that here at Squawk Ident, we hope that you and yours had a safe Thanksgiving holiday wherever you found yourself. Whether with family and friends or in a hotel room while on a layover, we know how the holidays can be for aviation industry employees and frontline workers. Our hats are off to you regardless. This time of year sparks the beginning of the holiday travel rush. Most importantly, we want you to all be safe, stay healthy, and know that you're not alone. This time of year is also all about giving back a little bit to those who might need your help, bringing joy to their loved ones. If you find yourself with a few extra dollars in the cookie jar this year, we want to talk to you about a fantastic drive that is going on right now. If you can, the American Airlines training department has launched a program called Kids Bikes for Christmas. It's a drive that helps establish more than 100 bikes each year to needy kids around the area. If you find yourself in Texas, all you need to do is call or text Lori Klein at 336-337-3157 or Denise Parker at 817-657-1035. And we'll have more information about that in the show notes. What they'll do is they will accept either a check for a bike that they can purchase or helmets for kids, or you have a couple other options. And I find the second option probably a lot easier. You can just go on Amazon or go online to buy a bicycle for a child and send it to the American Airlines Flight Academy. Attention Denise Parker or Christy Rushland. The address is 4601 Highway 360, MD 863 in Fort Worth, Texas, with an area code of 76155. Again, we will have all this information in the show notes. All the bikes will be delivered to 3 charities on December 18th, so you need to get this going as soon as possible if you can. Help them make the holidays a little brighter for the local Dallas-Fort Worth children who could never dream of getting a bike for Christmas. Anyone that can participate is encouraged to do so. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 95 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. Today's featured guest is an Airbus captain at Legacy Airlines. He and I recently had the opportunity to again share a flight sequence together out there on the flight line. He shared with me a few fantastic stories from his past and how he is excited about the next 6 months and his approaching retirement flight. What an incredible story that started in the year 1960, when at the age of 3 years old, A young David Ortiz sparked his passion for aviation by watching crop dusting operations while growing up on the family tenant farm outside of Houston, Texas. That was a pastime that turned into an acceptance into the Air Force Academy and later a pilot commission in the United States Air Force. I am looking forward to hearing all about his journey in aviation. We hope you are too. We are honored to have Captain David Ortiz join us today. Captain, good morning and welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Anthony. Appreciate you. That's a great introduction. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. You know, I saw your name on this last trip that I had, and I recognized it, and I thought, man, I flew with this guy before. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I know I've flown with this guy before. And so I looked it up. We have for those of us pilots at Legacy Airlines that have this third-party app called Lightsaber. You have to pay a subscription. I think it's $26 a month. But if you have this third-party app, it's a great app to have because it can get you access to so much more information than the company provided access through their website and portals and whatnot. And so I clicked on your employee number, and sure enough, boom, 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 there it was. We flew together 2 legs back in 2019. Mm-hmm. And so then when we saw each other at the airport there in Ontario, as we were boarding the aircraft, it all kind of flooded back who you were and your history. And it's amazing how we do that as aviators, that we can just kind of, you recognize the name, and then as soon as you see them in person, all that information comes flooding back. You know, I remembered that you were living in Arizona, and I was like, don't you? And you're like, yeah, I live out there in Arizona, and we both used to live in that area. I used to live there, but I used to live there. So we kind of shared that commonality, that common experience. And we had a fantastic trip together.
Yep, we sure did. I mean, as soon as you walked down, I go, yep, that's Tony.
Yeah, and actually, the last time we flew together, I don't think I had started the podcast because it was August of 2019, and I started the podcast in October. So, yeah, we had a lot of catching up to do. And our recent trip started out with the Ontario to Dallas leg, and then we were joking around because we're like, oh, we're on line holder reserve assignments.
All right.
And do you get many of those 3-hour sits?
No, only through Dallas, a couple. But you're right. You know, anything can happen when you sit there for 3 hours, you know.
Yeah.
But I've had a few.
Yeah, end up being ripe for a rescheduling or something like that. Now, I got to tell you, I'm very happy that you made it home, because at the end of this little trip that we had, we were reassigned. And out of, was it Orlando? We were reassigned. Yes. So instead of having a nice long layover in Orlando, where we had planned to record in person this interview, before we landed that night, we got the beeping, you have been reassigned to fly the AM flight out of Orlando directly to Los Angeles International, which is not the airport where you and I started out of.
Correct.
Now, for you as a commuter, commuting into Phoenix, that wasn't a big deal. That was actually better for you.
Yeah, it was. Because I didn't have to get on, probably stay at the airport, catch the next day's flight, Thanksgiving Day morning. But for you, it was really inconvenient.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's not a big deal if all the cards lay correctly. And you and I both were making provisions to make sure that they did for me. And I appreciate that. When crew scheduling called you, you said, yeah, that's fine. I'll accept the assignment. And I'm sitting right here next to my FO. We've already talked about it. He's ready to go. Just please make sure that there's a van transportation or whatever transportation that you have scheduled is going to be there, because his car is in Ontario. And the scheduler told you, yeah, no problem. We're going to send him a note right now. We're going to take care of that, because it's not a scheduled thing. It was a reschedule. It was a last minute change. So about what? We were on the van, I think. My phone rang too. And it was scheduling, and they were just, dotting their I's, crossing their T's. First officer, Tony, are you aware that your schedule changed? Yes, I am. Thank you. Just please make sure that there is a shuttle waiting for me to take me to Ontario, because the company is responsible to get me back to where I started. Since we're based in LA, we're responsible for quite a few airports: Santa Ana, Ontario, Los Angeles, San Diego. So wherever you started, they're assuming your car or your vehicle is there. They're responsible to get you back to that location. Well, you and I said our goodbyes.
Yeah.
And I got to the curb and you text me, "Hey man, I got on the flight." And I'm like, "Congratulations, I'm stuck here." And it was because I got to the curb, and the van company, there was a van there, and I said, "Are you here for me?" And they're like, "No, I don't have anything for your flight number. Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yes." We went through all the.
Yes.
We called like twice last night, and like, "I have nothing." And so he calls dispatch, and he's like, "I got nothing." And so I'm like, "Just okay, I'm on a call." So I called the hotel and limo desk, crew scheduling, and of course they're like, "Hold on, we'll really sorry about that. We're gonna fix this." And after about 10 minutes on hold, he comes back and he goes, "I called the van company. They said it's going to be 3 hours before they can pick you up." And I'm a pretty patient guy. I could see that, like, I was starting to blush, like I was getting mad. I'm like, "Well, no. Like, my captain talked to you guys last night. I talked to you guys last night. No. And they're like, "Well, we understand that is unacceptable. We apologize. We're going to get you a limo that we've called a limo service in LA. And that's why we took so long, because we were calling around, and we found someone, and they're going to be there in 20 minutes. Like, "Oh, okay, it's already been 20 minutes. And I'm like, "I really don't have any other options. It's not like I can just jump into Uber. It's like 70 miles and Uber doesn't go to Ontario." So I had to wait. So yeah, I called the chief pilot and I told him, and we had a conversation. He was upset as well. It's like, this kind of thing, if it was a one-off thing that doesn't happen very often, that would have been one thing. But this is like the third time in the last year that this situation played out identical. So we got some fixing to do.
They keep reassuring you and us that, hey, it's fixed, no problem, it's a done deal, and it's not.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, these are some of the things that us aviators, as professional aviators, have to deal with. And I know our co-host Roger, Captain Roger, would be making fun of us right now if he was on the show today. The boys, all of them, were busy with other commitments. I think Captain Roger actually got called out to do some flying, and Kyle and Rob are doing some Black Friday shopping. So wish them luck.
yes.
So let's talk about your journey. Your journey started out on the farm.
Pretty much, yes, it sure did.
I was so impressed with how you were telling me you're family of tenant farmers. What's that all about?
Well, we lived, like I said, south of Houston, about 35 miles out of there. My dad was a World War II veteran. He was in the Rhineland campaign. So we were always, as kids, like, hey, we're so happy. He went after Hitler. I tell my classmates, he went after Hitler. But we grew up in a farm, and he just wanted to be a farmer, and he raised 100 acres of cotton, and we just did a lot of the picking by hand. And we'd see crop dusters on the other fields because we didn't have the money to hire crop dusters. But they'd go under the power lines and they'd swoop up. And I remember being like 3 years old going like, wow, that looks like so much fun. Gosh, what a job. And then they would have bags of candy and they'd throw it towards us. So they were like our heroes, although I never got to meet them that I know of personally. But that was just where the seed was planted, and living out there out of Houston in the 60s, it's big space program. And that was like, oh my gosh, it was phenomenal. So that had a big influence. We had good schools. Some of my friends, their parents were engineers for NASA. And so that kind of developed the idea of like, hey, I'll just join the Air Force and fly.
And was it really that easy? I mean, here you are 3 years old. You're like, oh yeah, man, this is cool. And I can understand growing up in Houston during the space race to the moon. Had a huge impact. Were there a lot of children or people in your area that you knew of that you went to school with that ended up being pilots as well because of that?
There's one of my classmates in high school that he went to Texas A&M, and then he actually flew the same parallel career like me. So it was kind of interesting, but it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, because I thought, oh man, they're just having fun. I'll just sign up for the Air Force. So in the 7th grade, one of a new classmates, George Cobb, he came in and he was telling our class about, his dad was in the Air Force. He was I think, lieutenant colonel. And I remember being so impressed. I go, hey, George, talk to your dad and tell him I want to just join the Air Force and be a pilot for them. Because, okay. And just tell, if he has any things that he can tell me to do. So the next day he comes back and goes, well, my dad said that's good, but you just can't join the Air Force and fly. I go, what? He goes, no, you need to go to college. And I remember thinking, to fly an airplane, I need to go to college? He goes, yes. And I'm going like, oh no, because, we really didn't have the wherewithal to, at that time, there weren't really loans or anything to go to college. So I'm going like, and I was doing pretty good in school. I go, I'm going to have to get a scholarship. And, that, so I started like getting on that path, but I took like just normal college prep courses. And then one of my friends, said, hey, there's a history of aviation. We should take that course. So I go, yeah, let's do that. And sorry, that's a little background noise. But so I started, so Mr. Remington was the instructor, and he was an Army Air Corps pilot. And so he was really interesting, real strict. And so he started teaching us all about aviation. So it was close to Thanksgiving, about this time, a few days before this time right now. He goes, hey, next, in a few days, we got a guy from West Point, Joe McCutcheon's going to talk about West Point. And he was actually a junior at West Point. So he comes in, talks to the class. He goes, this is something you might be interested in. Some of y'all might be interested in. So he gave a long, 35-minute speech on it. It was over. So I get out. I get up and I tell him, hey, thank you for the brief, the talk about West Point. He goes, I love everything about it. And I go, except for one thing. He goes, yeah, what's that? And I just looked at him and go, I wish the Air Force had one. And he looked at me and goes, they do. I go, okay, well, what's it called? He looked at me like I was dumb. He goes, well, it's called the Air Force Academy. I go, well, you guys you're called West Point and you're the military academy. He goes, yeah, it's in Colorado. So I found out a little bit more about that. And then that's when I started like looking into it and applying.
Yeah. And it's amazing how, we look back on our careers and we look at all those moments that influenced our decisions. And if we just weren't there that day, how everything could be so much different.
Exactly. That is phenomenal. I mean, when you think about it. So sometimes there could be an opportunity right in front of you and you may like not even think about it. So it's important to, just listen sometimes.
Yeah. I always find myself telling, especially the younger generation and those that I can, just keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and ready. When we find ourselves in this day and age, especially, we're plugged in to the matrix. I always say, but we're plugged into their phones. We're plugged into we have our earbuds in. We no longer have those soft skills to just strike up a conversation with an absolute stranger. One of my favorite memes I read recently was a girl who put up like a video or a picture of someone at a Starbucks just sitting there, drinking a cup of coffee, looking around at the day. And it was a young woman who had posted this, and she's like, look at this psychopath. He's just sitting there. He's drinking a coffee. He's not having a conversation. He's not on his phone. He's not on a computer. He's not reading anything. He's just sitting there drinking a coffee alone. What a psychopath. I'm thinking, wait a minute. You've got it all wrong. This individual clearly knows that there is value in just taking a moment and living in the moment and looking around and enjoying life, enjoying everything. The fact that we live in a country, and most of us live in countries that have freedom, that have, a $5 fancy drink in their hand and high-speed internet access and all this stuff, and and basically supercomputers in their pockets with these smartphones now. Man, we've come a long way. We have to not, forget about how 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, these things were not reality.
True.
Google Maps was super spy shit, man. So here you were, a sophomore in high school. You had, Mr. Remington's aviation history class, had this special guest speaker come on and talk to you about the West Point, and you learned about the Air Force Academy. And it wasn't until your senior year in high school that you went on this trip in DC. Tell me about that.
Okay, correct. So I applied, we all have to apply in our junior year. And so, I was hoping to get accepted, but, it's pretty competitive. And then in our senior year, we also this was actually the first time I flew. We had a trip to Washington, D.C. I was about 10 of us. It was called Operation Close Up. And that time, what it was you just went to Washington, D.C., and with some teachers, and they kind of introduced you to the government as far as different agencies and how they operate, to learn more about our democracy. So that was very interesting. I mean, I hear them, and all of a sudden I'm like talking to Walter Cronkite.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I mean, for a few generations ago, like, who's that? But I mean, he was a legend.
Yeah.
I mean, he goes, "How you doing, young man?" I go, "Good, sir." I mean, it was a quick conversation, but it was still like, I was like totally like in awe, and then we ran into some other people. And then I just do remember Ted Kennedy and his wife at that time, Joan Kennedy. And I thought they were old then, but they were probably in their 30s, late 30s.
You're old.
So it was a very good, and that was the first time I flew. I actually flew, so I was like really super excited.
And how did that happen? It was part of the program?
Yeah, we flew from Houston to DC, but I would have never dreamed of going up to the pilots and say, "Hey, this is my first flight." But I mean, it was very exciting. I had window seat, and I remember staring the whole time. I go, "Okay, I'm getting closer to what I want to do." I mean, I'm in the air now. But that was actually the first time I flew. And the second time I actually flew was on the way to the Air Force Academy. And believe it or not, our flight was like 3 hours late. We were delayed. So I get there, and everybody's got their short hair, shaved head, and their uniforms, and learn how to march. I'm going like, oh my gosh, I've missed like a week. And then the upper constant goes, "No, you've only missed about 3 hours." I go, "And they're already doing this stuff?" "Yes, welcome here."
Oh, wow. And what an amazing opportunity to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an easy thing to do. So your grades must have been top notch. It sounds like the high school program really was catered to aviation. I mean, I don't ever remember any kind of aviation classes in my high school. I mean, just amazing opportunities that were there for you.
I think it was, and I think it was the time. I mean, it was Alvin High School, Nolan Ryan. It was before my time, but the baseball pitcher. And but I mean,
an alumni, huh?
Yes, Nolan Ryan, famous pitcher. But I mean, it was just where it was. It was good blue collar with some engineers too, and we just had a really good academic program. I mean, science, math. Mr. Corbett, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Mr. Corbett, probably the best instructor I ever had. And he was a math teacher. And Mr. De Almeida, who was former Air Force, I think he was a weatherman. I mean, we had phenomenal Mrs. Robinson. I'm sure I'm leaving out a bunch of great teachers. And I think that really did set the tone. And the fact that Mr. Remington was Army Air Corps, and he said, "Hey, we ought to do this." And we had electives. So, I mean, we didn't have ROTC program or anything like that, but we did have a good core, solid teachers that made a huge difference in our lives.
Yeah, I think that today we're just a different society, and the value of the academic system, especially the grade school academic system, we've become just as streamlined in education as we have in aviation, and we sometimes take for granted the fantastic just influence that our teachers, our mentors,
Yes.
have on us and our children. And we need to go back to recognizing that, because when you accomplish something and you feel like, you've made it, you've done it, we have to not forget of all the shoulders of the people that we stood on and all the boosts that we got to get there. And the fact that you remember your teachers' names from high school is amazing.
Yeah, I can't remember what the last frequency was. No.
Exactly. It's like, what day? Today I was like, what day is it? Why do I hear the garbage man? I ran out there. I was like, did I make the garbage? So you started at the Air Force Academy. You didn't start flying right away. You took your general education classes and whatnot. But when you did start, you started on the T-33. What was that like?
Yeah, see, the way, because a lot of us went there to fly, right? But you have to go through all the academics and everything. And really, you don't really start flying. Well, you can maybe start flying a little bit earlier. But during that summer, our first summer there, and we're getting yelled at and not beat up, but, kind of like verbally attitude adjustment, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had an orientation flight. It was like an hour and a half or so, and it's T-33. And, we got to meet a pilot, and he goes, hey, you're going to be sitting in the back seat. And it was really cool because, he did some maneuvers, and we, not to make us sick, but it was just so awesome because I'm thinking like, okay, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. And then, we'd go back and learn how to march and do all that stuff. So that was just enough to say, I'm not quitting. And some people quit because I guess they really didn't want it that bad. But I remember thinking like, as basic cadet, we've only been there like 3 weeks. I remember this one guy, and he gets up. He was a big guy. He was a football recruit. He goes, I'm leaving this place. I'm going to New Mexico State University. I was recruited by them. How about you? I go, well, obviously I'm 5'7", 120 pounds. No, I wasn't recruited. I came here to fly, and I'm not leaving this place. They're going to have to kick me out. I'm going to graduate, and I want to be a pilot. So, and we had some speakers that, some Vietnam veterans, some instructors that were actually POWs.
Wow.
Told us about some of the torture. So they made a big impact on us. Like, it was, yeah, flying's going to be fun, but we also knew that, hey, we could go to war, things of that,
Yeah.
and freedoms that we had, they weren't free. So, it was even though some of it wasn't fun, I'm glad I did it. It's kind of like saying when you run, I haven't run a marathon. My brother used to be a marathon runner, and you run a lot. But it's like someone asks you, hey, you just ran a marathon, like you just finished the academy. Would you do it again? Well, you're going to feel like, are you serious? I'm exhausted, But but when I look
For some
back,
of us, the answer is yes, though.
you guys are superhuman, dude. But yeah, it was great. It was.
Yeah. Talk about dangling the carrot, in front of the horse, because a T-38, you're in a two-place jet airplane from the beginning of the military jet age. And how awesome is that? Of course, that's going to make you look ahead at all of the difficult work that you're going to have to go through, or is what we used to say, pay your dues before you can get there.
But it's funny when you're young, because I remember going in the T-33 and I'm going like, oh yeah, the pilot may look so easy. I go, oh yeah, it's like, I didn't really realize how much work it was going to take at the time. I go, oh yeah, I'm coordinated, I'm good, I got good vision, and you don't really realize it until you get into it, how much work, at least I didn't, how much work at that age, when I was in college, how much work it was going to take, but it was well worth it.
Yeah. And so when was it when you actually started flying gliders? That was a couple of years later?
Yeah, it was, we had this program, so it's called Soaring, and sometimes you could get it after your first summer there, but I didn't get it. It was super selective, but my major came up and told me, hey, you got selected for the fall. So I did that in the fall in Colorado Springs, and that was incredible, just going up, and then just going in Colorado and then, gliding back down. And the instructor was only like 2 years older than me. We're all like, he was upper class, so I wouldn't say peers because they're really stratified there. And I remember he looks at me and goes, okay, you're going up solo now. I just got one bit of advice. Bring it back in one piece. I thought, yeah, I hope so. I want to do that.
Bring myself back in one piece.
But was pretty cool. And that's all really, we didn't do a lot of aviation. Some people, they probably had the more insight or wherewithal to do it on the side, but I didn't really think about that. And then when I was a senior in high school, we had the Cessna training, we call it T-41 training. And that was really cool, where we went with instructor, we flew, and then we soloed. But I think we just did one solo, and then the program was over. That was okay, now you're ready. When you graduate, you go into pilot training. That time for the Air Force Academy, if you were physically fit, you were going to go to pilot training.
So a guaranteed commission then?
It's guaranteed active duty commission and regular reserve and guaranteed pilot slot. So, and there was only 25% that were not pilot qualified. So if you saw someone at the academy at that time with glasses, you knew they were super, super smart, because there were so few slots, so many people competing for those few slots. So he always hung around the smart guy and say, hey, okay, help me figure this out. How does this calculus problem work? Or how does this physics equation work? But that was another dynamics.
I see. Yeah. So you were able to work the system.
Yes.
In order to get your best possible opportunity to get your wings.
Yes.
Now, you graduated in 1979. Did you go right away to the U.S. Air Force?
No, that was interesting because, being there and studying so much, and then I did some boxing when I was a senior, and got wrong. My bell rang a few times, but anyway, one of my last fights, I had a deviate septum, and so at the academy, you had your physical fitness, your physical eval for pilot training, and my eyes were just a little bit I've been studying too much. So I said, hey, you got 2 issues, but we can send you right to nav school. And I go, no, I came here to be a pilot. He goes, well, you can take the test again in the fall. So then we had a admissions advisor department that said, hey, why don't you advise for us, for 1 year and then go to pilot training and try to go to pilot training. So I thought, well, I know about the Air Force Academy. I can travel to schools and talk about it. I don't have to read about it. My eyes can be well rested. And that's what I did. And then I took my physical test, and then the doctor was really cool. I mean, he was ancient. He was 45.
Hey.
now he's like a baby. But anyway, he goes, okay, it's looking all right. I don't know, it's a little bit close on the deviate septum. He goes, how bad do you want to go to pilot training? I go, really bad. He goes, have fun.
Wow.
So that's when a year later.
That's fantastic. So you got in active duty commissioned officer in the U.S. Air Force. And what was the first aircraft that you were training on?
The T-37, the Dragonfly. It's like a side-by-side seating, and it's really low. It was in Arizona, so it was like June, 120 degrees. No air conditioned. So it was a fun plane to fly, but we did that for 5 months. And then we went to the T-38 Talon, which was really high performance, a lot of fun. So it's about a year-long program. So, and then from there, we got my assignment. And initially who didn't want to be a fighter pilot? Okay. I wanted to be, and I was okay. And then I go oh man, I'm not doing it's only going to be limited slots. I'm not doing as good to get it. I'm not going to get it, So I go, what am I going to do? Then I thought about this. Then I thought about a weather ship for a while. I go, I don't want to go into a hurricane, although that would be interesting, but I don't think so. Then I thought, well, I want to have an impact. And then the guy goes, how about a B-52? I go, man, I don't know. I go, that's a lot of power. Yes, I'll do B-52s. So B-52s. Of course, my mother-in-law would say, you must have made somebody wrong. I mean, here we're in Arizona, and I'm going to South Dakota and North Dakota. I goes, you really ticked off somebody. I go, I'm sure I did. But it was a good career.
Yeah. Well, B-52 in 1981, the height of the Cold War, your station was nuclear alert for 10 days a month.
Yes.
And, you must have had some pretty top secret missions going on there. Anything you can talk about?
Not on that specifically. Just I will tell you there is something I can tell you, but I will tell you that it was a real eye opener when we went through training for the specific mission and the process that we had. It was very detailed, and it was quite summary and said, "Hey, look, I have a responsibility to this country. You know, it's critical, and if they're going to send me, it's absolutely necessary." So we actually, we had a lot of tests to make sure that command and control, as you would think, is absolutely, it's got to be 100%. You got to do the right.
No questioning orders.
Exactly, and you got to be able to decipher it right. So we had a lot of long missions. I mean, there were basically 12, 14 hours. The longest mission I ever had, we had this program they call Gallant Eagle. We can talk about it. We wanted the Russians, the Soviet Union, to know our capabilities, to know how good we were or are, because they also had capability, but we wanted them to know we were dead serious and we could do it if we were called upon. So, we launched almost every plane except for the ones that were nuclear alert, that were ready to go. And then we just went up through Canada, bore holes in the sky forever, got a bunch of in-flight air refueling with KC-135s. So in their mind, they knew that we could actually go and at least, hit their target. And we had the capability to come back and make it all the way back to the home station. And we did low levels. I mean, it was a 25-hour mission. I mean, I was like,
wow,
23 years old, like, okay, but it was that type of, it's like, so it was good in the fact that I felt like this is what we needed to do. And we were trained, a strategic air command, we would never really went to combat, so to speak. It wasn't conventional. We were strictly nuclear. Later, we had a conventional capability, but it was just a matter of time, and I didn't go to combat. But it was all like, hey, we could do it if we needed to. And so, it was good. I mean, it's good to have a good wife that, really was supportive of that.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. But your missions, 20 plus hours commanding an aircraft, you weren't just sitting there programming an FMS system and turning the autopilot on. You were using stuff like celestial navigation, LORAN navigation. You were doing in-flight refueling, the low-level work, as you mentioned. I mean, were they using obviously they were using like a sextant and a celestial chart?
Yes, I mean, the navigators there were superb. I mean, they had to be very detailed. And then we were getting other SI came on board. Then we like offensive avionics systems with some INSs, but we still had backup. They had to still do celestial nav to make sure that if that equipment went out, they could still do the mission. I mean, and we had some really good navigators. And my brother actually was a KC-135 navigator, so he was always like, he was precise all the time. And so it in-flight air refueling was challenging in a B-52. In a B-1, it wasn't as challenging because it was very responsive. But I remember the first time I in-flight air refueled as a co-pilot, the captain goes, "Hey, you want to try it?" or our aircraft commander would call him, go, "Yeah, let me try it." Because he would go in, stable as a rock. Then he goes, "Okay, Dave, your turn. You're like 20 feet out. You're coming in." And all of a sudden, the tanker keeps going like this. I go, "Hey, why is he moving?" He goes, and then the captain keeps waving at the boom operator as we go across the screen. And I go, "Hey, Dave, it's not him, it's you." What? But then I got, he pretty much taught me how to do it. So it was a lot of fun. Low level in the B-52 was a lot of hard work because you physically felt beat up. So I don't know how the navigators did it, electronic warfare officer and the gunner at the time, because they didn't have the windows that we had to see out, so they were getting, you can imagine a lot of them got a lot of seasick or air sickness, and it took them a while to get used to that. But even when super bumpy, low level in the B-52, I mean, you did it for about 2 hours per mission. So you're going 320 miles an hour, 350. So you really felt it. I mean, in the B-1, so there's a difference. I like to compare it like in the B-1, the low level at the time we did low levels, it's like a hot butter knife cutting through butter. It was so smooth. I mean, it was just day and night. And in those missions, instead of being 12-hour missions, because we're going so much faster, were like 5.5-hour missions.
Aha. Now, you mentioned the B-1, and you were awarded the B-1B Lancer in 1987.
Correct.
The bone, as you called it. I learned a new term. I didn't know it was called the bone. So you were aircraft commander, and you were stationed where, in Grand Forks?
Yes. I wanted to go to like a more southern base, like Wichita, Kansas. So I told my wife at the time, hey, I'm going to put in for the B-1. She goes, okay, go for it. Where's it based at? I go, well, Abilene. Oh, we can be in Texas. I go, well, I don't know. I think we can get to McConnell easy, though, to Wichita, Kansas. So, and then the other base was Ellsworth, South Dakota, Ellsworth Air Force Base, which we were already stationed there at Rapid City. Well, I got the assignment. So I got good news and bad news. She goes, what? I go, I got the assignment. She goes, what's the bad news? Because we didn't get Abilene. She goes, we got Wichita, Kansas. I go, no. What? We're going back to Ellsworth, South Dakota? I go, well, about 350 miles north of that. We're going She goes, what? Don't worry. It'll be about the same. No, it wasn't. It's a lot colder.
How many polar bears?
The kids were like, the kids loved it. You know, of course, they were kids. You know, they loved the snow. And then later I got a warm assignment, a warm climate assignment. And every night they said their prayers, please help us go back to Grand Forks, North Dakota. I'm going like, why are you saying that? Do that when you're grown up. Because no, we want to go back now while our friends are there. Because they were used to moving. They knew after 3 years their friends would move too. Change your prayer, don't they? But that's where I was.
Yeah. Well, you know, you were telling me about some of the amazing operations that you were a part of on the B-1. And when you said red flag, I thought, wait a minute, no way.
Yes.
Tell me first off, how the heck did you get assigned to a red flag mission?
Well, but believe it or not, I mean, we actually did it in B-52s also, which was a lot of fun. But a lot of times in B-52s, we would would go to the red flag and land back at our home station. We couldn't even enjoy Las Vegas, right? And then camaraderie with the other aviators there. But in the B-1, we actually not deployed, but we did a temporary duty assignment there. So we were all kind of new, and our operations officer goes, hey, you guys are going to red flag. You're one of the first crews, and you're going to be one of the first crews that's going to use the terrain following system, because there were some issues with it before. Of course, it was day, it's good weather and everything. So he goes, so when you hook it up, I want you to go hard ride. There's soft, medium, and hard. Soft, it kind of like floats a little bit over the mountain. Medium's a little bit more, and then hard ride, it hugs the terrain, just to keep that, in case against surface air missiles and stuff, get below the radar. So anyway, so we did that, and the co-pilot and I, man, we couldn't believe how the machine responded. Going point, 8-9 Mach, and 200 feet off the ground.
Wow.
And, I mean, our eyes were literally this big, and our grins, when we landed, we're like, can you believe that? Because it's incredible. And as we were doing that, also, a fighter came after us, and because the first mission we went there, and so he's coming halfway around, and the defensive systems operator is saying, okay, he's so many miles, and he's fading away. And we landed, and we were met by our advanced team. He goes, oh man, he shot you down. And the F-15 pilot wasn't that far away, and he came and goes, what the heck? Well, he said something else, but he goes, I thought you guys were a B-52. So I started my turn, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh man, this is a fast move. This is a B-1. He goes, I could have got you. He goes, but I would have flamed out. I would have run out of fuel. But that was fun. I mean, that whole time, flying the red flag missions. I mean, like I said, I never went to combat, so I don't have that experience. But the red flag was so cool, because in B-52s, the things that we, like the F-111s would always smoke us. We had an area where it was kind of like a free fall, just kind of like a flat, you just go as fast as you can, and the F-111s would smoke us. And I remember we were flying this mission, and I see something out there, and I go, hey, Jamie, I go, does that look like it looks like a F-111? He goes, yeah, it's F-111, So I go, okay, I've been waiting all my life for this. So we smoked them. I go, yes, we finally did. Finally, But it was a lot of good camaraderie and some banter, between the aircraft, the pilots and stuff. So a lot of good rivalry type things. So I really enjoyed the military because we had that camaraderie and then our mission was so critical. So it was a great career. I enjoyed it. I mean, and then I was looking forward to my aviation, to my commercial career, which I wasn't sure I was going to get to do because when I first learned about it, I go, I'm already like 34, 35. And at that time, when it was regulated, you couldn't be older than, I don't know if it was 32 or 33. You would miss the boat. And then it became open to a lot of us after that.
Mm. Yeah. And so you had this amazing experience. You got to really see the capability of the B-1B and really take it to the edge. And then in 1992, you got a special assignment to Santa Monica, California. That probably was a big adjustment to go from Grand Forks to Santa Monica.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was very interesting because it was a 1-year special duty. I ran research fellowship. So we worked with these big brains over there. And it was working like, okay, I was paid because it was B-1. I was a bomber guy. So they were looking at how do we modernize the B-52 and the B-1, to be more capable, and how do we modernize our forces. So for that first year, we just traveled to Rockwell, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin, and just kind of talked to, when I say we, it was just me as one of the pilots and another Air Force guy, and then the guys with the PhDs. But some of them were, they knew a lot about the plane. I was kind of impressed. I mean, they could have been like I think they were like, they wanted to be really polished, but I mean, they were just phenomenal. So you could like translate what they were saying, and they understood you. And so they really helped develop the B-1 to have the conventional munitions capability that it has today. We call it Conventional Munitions Upgrade Program, which was kind of a fight to get because, as you remember, the Air Force had canceled the B-1, B-1A, then became B-1B. Ronald Reagan brought it back. Then the big push had been for the stealth bomber. And the original plan was to have like 385 B-2 stealth bombers. Then it became like 100. Then it became even lower. Then the wall came down. And then President Bush 1 said, okay, 20. So once it said only 20 B-2s, now they had to put the money into making the B-1 more capable, because it was strictly nuclear. And we kind of said it had a conventional capability in the 80s, but at that time, the ball game was the nuclear warfare. That was our mission. So the general just said, okay, we'll drop a dumb bomb and we'll say but it didn't work that way. Once Desert Storm started, Senator John Glenn, former astronaut, he was a big supporter of the B-1. And he was going to send us, and we're ready to go. But it was like, they can't even drop the dumb bomb's not even going to hit the target. So it was a really bad time. The Air Force had some explaining to do.
Yeah. And that's how you got the RAND Research Fellowship that was really studying how the B-1B could be converted to have capable conventional munitions.
Correct, because it was so expensive. The nuclear program is so expensive, and you have to have triple the redundancy, and that's why everything had to be electromagnetic pulse hardened. So it costs so much, So once with the SALT treaty, we got away from nuclear, and they said, okay, now the B-1's strictly conventional. Years later, then it was a lot easier to do the modifications and upgrades because it's a whole different ball game. Still, the nuclear ball game is very, very expensive, and just the way it is.
And we'll be right back with more from Captain Dave Ortiz. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Well, we've been talking with a fantastic aviator that's had a just wonderful journey in aviation, and we're so proud and honored that he's decided to share that with us. Now, Captain, we talked about your experiences with the B-52, the B-1B, amazing aircraft. I used to have, I think I told you this week when we were flying together, that I used to have this giant poster in my room. Now, most of my friends, you know, in their teens back in the 80s were, you know, pictures of Baywatch, pictures of, you know, rock and roll, like AC/DC and Metallica posters on their wall. I had F-4 Phantoms. I had the F-15. I had this giant poster of an SR-71. And I also had a giant poster of a B-1 with, you know, all of the wings that are swept back and just an amazing, good-looking airplane. And you're here doing missions around that time. So in 1993, though, and most civilians don't realize this, they think, well, if you're a pilot in the Air Force, your entire time you're flying airplanes. And that's not necessarily true. In 1993, you spent some time over at Langley. How did that transition happen that you went from the B-1, then you ended up in Santa Monica doing the research, to transitioning back over to the East Coast?
Right. And so the way it works, like in the Air Force, they had like, you flew probably like your first 10 years or so. Okay, they call it your gates. And then after that, you did what they call a rated supplement assignment, because they didn't, just when you were getting good, they took you out of the cockpit, you know, I mean, when you're really at your peak, but they took you out to bring the pilot perspective into the staff field, which is very important. So the Santa Monica was a 1-year assignment. So I knew after that I had to either go to the Pentagon or Langley or somewhere. So I got Langley Air Force Base, which was Air Combat Command. As you recall, the Cold War was over. The wall came down, the Berlin Wall. So then there was no longer Strategic Air Command. It pretty much, what happened was Tactical Air Command and Strategic Air Command merged into Air Combat Command. But the packs look exactly like the Tactical Air Command. So it was pretty much the fighters and the bombers together, shooters they called it, and then they put the other planes with Military Airlift Command. So I went to Langley and just worked on special assignments. So we did the studies and analysis. Again, trying to, we did at RAND, trying to modernize the B-1 and get it fully conventional capable. So it was like a 3-year assignment. So, I mean, and at that time, the Air Force was drawing down. So it was getting very difficult to get back to flying. There was less opportunities. And then I had made Lieutenant Colonel, but I hadn't pinned on yet. So I was competing for very few slots. So I was the first alternate. So I thought, I'm going to be able to fly. And then one of my friends calls me up and says, hey, the Kansas Air National Guard, they fly B-1s. Their advisor, Air Force advisor, is retiring. So you should put your name in the hat for it. And I go, man, I don't know anybody there. At least I didn't think I did. So I put my name in the hat. I turned out to be a good friend of us and my son later. His son, they became great friends. And so anyway, he kind of said, hey, Dave, I put my name in the hat. And he goes, I don't know who you are. He calls me. He goes, but two gentlemen are standing up on my desk saying, you got to hire this guy. There were guys I flew with at Grand Forks. There's Rich Ewell and Bill Eads. So, you know, they pretty much helped me get that job, and it was awesome. So basically, I was their Air Force advisor, flying back. But then, as I mentioned, they went from F-16s to B-1s, and they were picking up the conventional warfare. So they do conventional, like warfare, chemical warfare. So we had to do all that training of how to do with wearing all the MOP gear, the chemical warfare gear, and still be able to do your job. So a lot of it was, you know, they had great people there. It was a fantastic assignment. So after that, I said, okay, this is going to be my retirement assignment. Then I'm going to go to try to go with the commercial airlines.
Yeah. So this was back in 1996 when you got the B-1B assignment at the Air National Guard Unit, the 184th Bomb Wing, 127th Squadron in Wichita, Kansas. This is a pretty elite group here. This is not. I mean, you're pretty humble in saying, "Yeah, I got this," but this is a pretty elite group here.
They were superb. I mean, the Kansas Air National Guard, they were the fighter weapons training of the whole guard in the F-16. So it was I mean, I was like augmenting them, but it was a great assignment. It was good for the family. My brother was also Chris, he's the KC-135 navigator, so he was based there too. So it was very good. It was very good for the family, and it was very, very good. We enjoyed it. A lot of good people there, Kansas people, very nice. So
yeah. Yeah, so now a year before retirement, which we recently learned here on Squawk Ident that in the military, about a year before you retire, you start to look for civilian jobs in the airline industry. And we were just talking with Colonel Terry Schooler, our friend here at the podcast, the U.S. Army, and he just went to an organization, RTAG, that helps helicopter pilots in the Army transition towards an airline job once they become civilians. Now, you were also planning about a year before your retirement for a civilian job in the airline industry, and you were looking around at some pretty big airlines. I believe you were telling me Southwest, United, and Airways Air was an alias to an airline that was out there at the time. How did that work? Did you just start applying for jobs, or?
Well, we had, like I said, we had a lot of the Kansas Air National Guard pilots. Some of them were like full-time, and some were I forgot what it's called, traditional. I guess they had other jobs, and they would come in like on every other weekend and fly. So we had a lot of them that worked for United, although we didn't have anyone for Southwest. And then we had some other air carriers. And so, you know, they had tips on, hey, you got to do this. You know, this is what I would do if I was you. So we all shared stories. We kind of helped each other out. And then there was also at that time, Air Inc. was huge. It was kind of like run by a United pilot that would kind of like set up seminars, and you'd go to the conventions, and the reps at different airlines would be there. Oh. So that's how you and you just throw in your application. So I really wanted Southwest. My wife is originally from Mexico, but she grew up here in the Phoenix area. So I went to that interview, and I thought I did great, but I just, it didn't work out for me. And at that time, you know, I'd say, well, which is the best airline? At that time, the answer was, whoever hires you. Well, there's more to it than that. But the other thing too is like, I think one of the things was, it's like a suit. It either fits, either you're a good fit or you're not a good fit. I don't know more. I don't know how to explain it, but it worked. So I didn't get hired there, but I did get to the other airline that you were talking about. Yeah. So that was a thing when I got that, and I was happy. And once we went to class, it was like, oh, you know, welcome here. And we had people from all walks of life. And I mean, and one of my friends we ended up being John Roberts. We filmed together in the 737. But I'm sitting there, and I mean, I had like about 3,800 hours of flying military, which was pretty good. He gets up, and he had like, I got to ask him, but I thought he said like 10,000 hours. And he was like about 4 years younger than me. And I'm going like, I got to meet this guy. Wow. So I met him, and we were actually paired up together in the 737s. And we're still good friends now. And he's based in one of our other bases in the Northeast, but we still keep in touch, and we're actually pretty good friends. So I guess we networked, and then just prepared for the interviews, and you know, went to it, and they needed to hire people. So like right now, it's going to be a great time.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see. I mean, we've always said that the nature of this career field is very cyclical. You know, you have to time it right, and the only thing, you know, you can rely on is that it's temporary. So if you're in a lull and they're furloughing and the market's not doing well, or the economy's not doing well, or you're in the middle of a pandemic, just dig in, get your flying where you can, get your studying done if you can, and be ready, because when the tables turn, as they are happening right now, where we're starting to see $160,000 worth of bonuses if you go to a Envoy Airlines with all their hiring bonuses and career progression bonuses. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, we were getting paid what, 20, 30, 18,000 a year when we first started, 20,000 a year. And now, oh, amazing.
It is amazing. But you're right. You got to be ready. And a lot of it is time, and some of it's beyond your control. But what you can't control, like you said, Tony, you should control it and be proactive. Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you started out, as you mentioned, and we're calling it Airways Air. In 1999, that's when you retired from the U.S. Air Force, and you were awarded a Boeing 737 slot. And I remember you telling me that your first domicile was DCA, IAD combo, Washington, D.C. co-domicile. And that must have been pretty familiar for you.
Yes. Haven't been up towards, up in that area. And matter of fact, I wanted to live up there, like in the Virginia area. My wife has always been super supportive. She goes, yeah, we love Virginia. And then my kids were like getting towards high school or beyond. And they said, we don't want to go there because an A is like 92 or 93, whereas everywhere else in the country is like 90% is an A. So, but yeah, that was very familiar. I ended up going to Charlotte, that area, but it was very familiar. And one of the big differences that I saw between the military and civilian commercial aviation was like in our military, I don't know how it is now, but when we had like about 3 months of systems training and simulator trainings, we did it, all these things in the simulators. Then we hit the flight line. So then we flew, and in the commercial airline business, it goes much faster. And I couldn't believe, one of the things I remember is my instructor was awesome, IOE instructor, operational experience. And so my first landing, I had like 100 people on board, and I'm going to land this thing. And we're going into LaGuardia. And it looks like a postage stamp of an airport compared to like the 15,000 feet that I had in B1s and B52. So I'm going like, wait a minute. And I got people here and I'm going to land this thing. He goes, yes. And I remember like, oh my gosh. But so I think that was, that's something that I won't forget. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But the simulators are so good, but we weren't, it was just a different philosophy because, the economics and when I started flying commercially and we weren't doing so well financially at the time, I told my wife, this is a totally different ball game. I mean, the people are great and everything, but if we're not making money, it's going to be hard to keep going. Like you said, you got to be, it's cyclical.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true that your first experience at a 121 carrier is something you'll never forget, whether that's right into a major or a mainline or a regional or commuter airline. Either way, you're drinking from the fire hose. Your training's very short-lived because it's all revolves around the good old-fashioned dollar. So how can we get this candidate or this new hire through as quickly as possible? Check off all the boxes. Fulfill the FAA requirements in what we are teaching. Sign them off, get them the pass, get their simulator time, and then their very first flight is a revenue flight. And you never know when your pilots are up there doing IOE, unless you're a pilot yourself and you recognize, oh, it's a check airman in the left seat. I better, where's my neck brace? No. But you never forget that experience. It really is, in terms of your career, at least, it really is a pivotal point when you make that first landing. And, sure. I'm sure the military had its extreme exciting moments, especially knowing, being so young and knowing what you're doing is so important and so critical. And, you're flying passengers around, and there's a reason. When we do our final counts, we don't call them, we got so many bodies on board, we got so many passengers on board. No, we have souls on board. Those are souls. Those are people's grandmas and grandchildren and CEOs going to business or the first-time flyers that are nervous. I mean, you're responsible for all that, and it's a big deal. And we don't really think about it up there, but it is true. So you made the move to Charlotte. How long were you based in Washington before you moved over to the Charlotte domicile?
I was based in Washington for approximately 6 months.
Oh,
And then my family was still in Wichita because our son was a senior in high school, and I didn't want to move him. I didn't want to move him his senior year.
yeah.
So I ended up my daughter her junior year. Boy, that went. She hated me for a while.
Yeah.
That's a tough, but she did well. She did well there. But we moved. We picked Charlotte because the weather was pretty good outside of Charlotte, and so I moved. We moved the family there September of 2000. So I was so happy because I go, okay, I'm not commuting anymore to Wichita, Kansas. I don't want to be a commuter. And the job was just totally different. I mean, we had this nice house, and I was there with my family. We had one in college already, one about to go to college, then a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old. Then we waited forever, and we had a 2-year-old son. So, it was nice to be there, and I didn't want to commute. And so for that year and a half, it was really nice.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah. And it's amazing how we often say that once you get a job at a civil or civilian airline, there's really 3 jobs involved. There's the job if you're on reserve,
Correct.
which is a completely different bag from when you're a line holder. And then in that line holder and reserve category, both really, you have those that commute and those that do not. And we're talking about not an hour drive commute. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about if you're starting out at an airport other than the one you're flying out of for work, you're commuting into that airport, as you do to this day, from Phoenix to LA just to get to work. So you have to get yourself to the Los Angeles International Airport or whatever satellite airport you're responsible to start your trip at. So, I mean, it's a different bag for everyone. And it took me 15 years. And that's not necessarily true because I was based in LA while I lived in LA for a short period of time at the regional as well. But it wasn't until I got to Legacy Airlines that I was able to hold an LAX domicile and just drive to work and not have to deal with what's the weather like? I have to check the loads on the flights and what airline is going to get me there, and do I have to log in and list myself for a jump seat, or how can I do it, or do I know anybody at that airline? Can they tell me what the loads are like if I don't know? So my hat's off to all commuters out there. And if you've never commuted before and you find yourself to be a professional airline pilot, please, absolutely please, always, give your utmost respect to that commuter because they are really sacrificing a lot for this career, and commuting is not easy. If you can get them the jump seat, if you can make sure that the gate agents accommodate them, do what you can because
Exactly.
it is such a tough gig. It's one of the hardest things. Commuting is harder than being on reserve, for sure.
Yes.
Hands down.
Like you said, it's another job.
Yeah. Now you did this move. You had your wife and your 4 children, and you moved to Charlotte, and everything was happy, as you said, for about a year and a half. And then what happened in early 2001?
Yes. Well, things were going well, and then one thing at our airline though, we were losing money, so I was looking to get back to the Air Force Reserve because I'm going like, maybe we should go and do something for a while and then come back to flying. But lo and behold, believe it or not, the day that I was going to go into the Air Force Reserve, I had to go into the recruiter's office because the C-17 in Charleston was already looking at me, but I had to put my name into the system. So my wife and I are driving to South Carolina, about a 2-hour drive, Columbia, South Carolina. So they wanted me to come to the recruiting station September the 10th. I go, I can't really do that because I'm flying, but I can be there September the 11th, 2001. So the kids went to school. We had our toddler. We go into the recruiting station, and the 2 recruiters have the phone to their ear and go, sir, we'll be with you in a second. So I didn't think much of it. My wife sat down. She looks at the news, and then we see the Twin Towers smoldering, and it goes to the Pentagon. I don't remember the exact time, but I remember saying, what's going on? And they go, sir, we're under attack. Now, I didn't know that they were going to use our planes against us, but in the military, we've always been briefed that Osama bin Laden wants to start a war with us. We had no idea how. And I remember looking at that, and my first words were, Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden. And then I go, hey, let me, use me wherever you can. He goes, sir, we're going to be busy recalling everybody. So, we're driving home. It's so surreal. I mean, you were way younger. So we all remember at least where we were. And I remember driving back, not a plane in the sky, and just feeling like, wow. And my friends, I had a lot of friends in United, I still do. They'd call me, goes, Dave, you're going to get furloughed. You're going to get furloughed. I go, no. I got like 700 people below me. I should be good. You're in denial, and then you're furloughed, and now you're going like, oh man, what do I do? I was actually able to get back to the military, even though I had retired. But it was such a turnaround. I mean, I remember like my daughter going to different colleges, and after I've been furloughed, and people, oh, what do you do? I was an airline pilot. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry, which was so ironic, when you think about it. But we all have our stories, and like one of my friends, his dad would say, you got to keep the balls in play. Just try to keep everything. Don't let the wheels fall off. Keep doing what you can do to keep. I think that was very important. And so we were fortunate. I was fortunate that my family and I, we had the military to fall back on, because it was quite scary. Like I had this huge house, expensive, one in college, another child about to go to college. And first time in my adult life since I was 18, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I go, we may lose, as long as we have each other. I go, but we could lose this house. I mean, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
And luckily, or thank God, it didn't happen that way. We were able to maintain. And but I went back to the military.
Yeah. So after 9/11 events, you inevitably got furloughed, and you went back to the U.S. Air Force for 2 more years, where you worked as an analyst back at Langley Air Force Base. Yeah. And that was 2 years, but you were furloughed for 5. What were you doing at the other time?
So it was correct. Well, I did that for a while, and the Air Force was downsizing again. Although I was good, I could stay there another year. But then the airlines had, our airline had, so they were having a program, Jets for Jobs, okay, which basically, some of the commuter guys I flew with, they said, that was extortion. We gave them like jets, but we also said, you got to have some of our pilots to be your captains. So I did the Embraer 145. We share that in common. So I did that for Trans-States Airlines out of Richmond. And that, let me tell you, my hat's off to every commuter regional pilot. I mean, I'd heard the stories, but until you do it and you see how these professionals work, and it wasn't a lot of compensation, but what they work for and the hours and what they go through, I mean, it was definitely an appreciation. It's more than just words. I mean, you live it, and I lived it only for like a year, and I'm going like, I don't know how to do it. And then, so I did that for a while, and then I was able to get back to Tucson, Davis Monthan Air Force Base. My mother-in-law was sick; she had diabetes, so I told my wife, let's just get back to Arizona. And so we basically lived next door to their house. Well, we're actually with them. Well, we built our house here, the one I'm standing in front of. And then I drove to Davis Monthan, Tucson, every day, Monday through Friday, except for every other Friday I had off. So it's about 180-mile round trip, 180-minute,
Yeah.
every day, But I did that and try to keep the family, everything stable. And then the airline was recalling us, so I had to make a decision. But I go, hey, I want to. My wife goes, well, my wife was always supportive because we've been burned because we burned through a lot of our savings and
sure,
that because when I got hired, you always have to temper yourself, even if things are going great. I remember going like, well, my income's here, it's gonna go like this, and I'm thinking like, I was still in the military mode where there's different hazards, of course, but as far as like financially, you kind of know what your income's going to be, and you're going to get your paycheck no matter what. Airline's not exactly like that. So if I would say one thing, be more conservative, you know, like your parent or your grandparents, probably in your case, said, say, save for a rainy day. You know, if you can do that, that's what I would probably tell people. But yeah, it was, so I worked for Air Force South Ave, just some humanitarian missions or exercises out of Guatemala and Chile and Peru. And that was good. I did that for about 17, 18 months. And then the airlines were recalling us. So I came back in that June of 2007.
But June 2007, yeah, you got recalled. Airways Air recalled you back, and you're back on this time the A320, which is what you transitioned to the A320, and then 9/11 happened, and then now you're back on the A320, and you've been on the A320 ever since 2007 that you came back. And a few mergers later, we all kind of, those are in the industry know, there's quite a few mergers that happened between Airways Air and now inevitably Legacy Airlines. And that brings us really to today. 6 months from retirement, when we saw each other this week, you said, yeah, I'm excited because in 6 months I get to have my retirement flight and get that water cannon salute. And I was, that's some, it's fantastic. It's like hearing, it's my birthday today. It's like, wow, cool. Are you excited about this?
Yeah, I am. And, it's interesting because a lot of my friends some of them have retired from like FedEx, and some of them had to fire, the water cannon and everything. And some, another friend retired from United. And when I'm excited, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to do all that or get all that, because I guess I'm more excited about, flying with the people that I'm flying with, and kind of like, just kind of finishing it off, like finishing what I started. I mean, it turned out a little bit different, but, it's still finishing that part. And I have to say my family, to include the kids, I mean, they went through some sacrifices. I mean, especially because, the way everybody does, right? Everybody has their own story. But they also had to like endure a lot of things, whether within the Air Force, moving up, moving every 2 to 3 years, even when they were in high school. Then me going, hey, I'm gonna be an airline pilot. Hey, we're going to North Carolina. I uprooted my daughter when she was starting her junior year. She had a close boyfriend, and the good story though, they later got back together and they're married and they had 3 boys. So.
Oh wow, that's fantastic.
But he did. I'm proud of all of my kids that they've done well, and so I am excited. I'm excited about this is a chapter that's going to close. I'll always appreciate it, and then we'll go on to the next chapter. Maybe just enjoying some travel, some time with family and friends, visiting the grandkids and my brothers and sisters, and things of that nature. So yeah, that's exciting. I mean, I'm sure I'll miss some of it. I'm sure I'll go like, wow, but right now I feel like, I don't know if you ever saw that movie Forrest Gump, where something happened and he was running and running and running. And they're going like, oh, and it's philosophical, why are you running? And then they're all following him into the desert. And then he stops. He goes, what? Man, wait, he's going to say something like philosophical. And he goes, I'm tired. I'm going home.
Yeah. No, I kind of have heard this before. It's like, I'm done. This is great passion, that aviation that we share, and anyone that has wings or an aspiration to pin those wings on, they all know what you're talking about when you say you have a passion for aviation. Now, your journey has been just fantastic, and thank you so much for sharing all of it with us today. What I wanted to ask you now is a few questions about that. Now, has your journey that you found yourself on for aviation turned out the way you had ever imagined it?
I would say no. My wife would say hell no. Only because, I mean, it's been good, and I think that's the way life is. Sometimes you think it's going to be this way, and I got a plan, or even flying, right? hey, I got the plan, it's going to work out this, and you have to be ready for the unexpected, or, maybe you have to divert, or maybe you have a mechanical, maybe, you have a, passenger disturbance that creates more, like recently, a lot more issues.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be lied if I go, yeah, exactly, here I was going to be a fighter pilot. I was going to be like, in my youth, like an astronaut, and, all this type of things. But it's been exciting. It's been good. And it's been honest. And it's been a good livelihood. I mean, there was some bumps in the road, but I think everybody in life has a bump in the road, or several bumps in the road. That's just life. You have to like adjust and be thankful, and have, like you said, a support system, family and friends, and your faith. For me, it's important, that gets you through it. But to tell you the truth, after 9/11, I wasn't so sure I was going to get to come back. So that was kind of an interesting time, because I thought, hey, my aviation career could be over. I mean, I really did think, even with some other possible mergers, it looked like we were furloughed, that we were going to be done. We may not be recalled.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in some ways, a lot of ways, but that's life, right? If you knew everything ahead of time, it's like, okay, why do it?
Yeah. Yeah, we always say that, it's all about the journey, not the destination. And so, you've had such a great positive outlook on it. It was part of the pleasures of flying with you, just recently and in the past, that I remember, that you have a very positive outlook. And I think that's why we got along so well.
You do too. I mean, the stuff that you do, I mean, I don't want to toot your horn, but but you have a lot of interest, and what you're doing is awesome. I think this is a great service, especially for those, that are really looking to get insight into the field. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for saying so. The next question I wanted to ask was, you've had many challenges, as you've mentioned, along the way. What would you say has been the biggest challenge so far?
I think the biggest challenge for me personally, just like say, okay, I'm going to be an aviator, I'm going to be a pilot. It was just a different, I don't know if it's mentality or a different, I mean, we're all like type A, a lot of, pretty much. But like you mentioned, like academics, I was, very studious, very meticulous. I could prepare for an exam, and it's going to go this way. There was going to be no curve balls. It was pretty much set, so you get kind of used to that. You get used to that. And the thing about aviation, you constantly, well, at least when you first go, you're making corrections. And I remember one of my friends in pilot training, Joe Poto, he's also retired from us, a guy, Italian, from the Boston area. But we're doing simulators, and we're doing an arc to a radial, and he turned the wrong way. He was telling this story, and the instructor was getting on, and he goes, "But I'm correcting nicely." Remember that. I go, "I'm correcting nicely," So when you have hiccups, so I think the thing you had to learn is, hey, it's not going to go like you think it's going to go, but keep it within the parameters. Correct nicely, come back, work at it, work. Yeah. I think having that attitude, like, okay, I'm going to have the perfect flight and everything's going to be, you just got to be confident in your, put in the work, like you mentioned before. You have to really put in the work, chair fly, and then execute it, but be ready. I think the hardest thing was that it's so dynamic. And if you're a person that wants everything set a certain way, I mean, you just have to learn how to, in yourself, you'll wire yourself to deal with that. And if that makes any sense.
Sure, you have to adapt and keep your situational awareness high. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, that's what keeps us safe.
Yes.
Now, you've had some exciting events happen in your aviation career, both in the military and in your civilian time. Tell us the most exciting event that you were a part of while flying in the military.
That's I wasn't in combat, so I don't have that experience. But I think the people played such a big part. But for me personally, back in the height of the Cold War, like 1985, it was going into 1986, were based at Barksdale Air Force Base. I was a young aircraft commander at the time, and I had a young crew. I mean, we're all like barely, I was barely a captain. Another guy was a captain. Everybody else was a lieutenant or like an airman first class for the gunner. And we were one of 3 crews picked to fly for 6 weeks. I remember we're based at Barksdale. We're going to fly B-52 out of England, Fairford, England, for 6 weeks into the European theater. I mean, 6 weeks, and it's a B-52. So that was super exciting for us because one, we got to deploy and then, fly the guns, enjoy the British beer, and then have me and the co-pilot, we had our wives come out for a week. So, I mean, we made like a vacation of it, even though we had like 12-hour missions sometimes. But it was so exciting because we got to do this and everybody wanted to do it. And I had just come to my little brother's Air Force Academy graduation in '86 grad, Chris. And so squadron commander's flying with my crew. And he goes, hey, I got to ask you a question. This is before we were going to get selected. So he goes, okay, my squadron commander calls me from base operations because he's about to go fly. And he goes, I was on vacation because my brother graduated. He goes, listen, got to ask you something. You want to be an instructor or you want to be with your crew to England for 6 weeks? And we had heard about it. He goes, yeah, I want to do both. He goes, well, you can't. You have to pick one. I go, what? He goes, you have to pick one because of the timing. I go, well, I thought about it for a second. I go, how about if I go to be an instructor and my crew goes to England? He goes, it doesn't work that way. If you choose to be an instructor, your crew doesn't go. And, we were pretty tight. And I go, and he goes, and I got to tell you, your electronic warfare officer, Jim Sternberg, God rest his soul, he had cancer later, but he goes, he was a great guy. He goes, he's on his knees praying that you say yes. Tell him we're going to England. Pack your bags, we're going to England. So, I mean, flying was exciting because we're in the German theater. I mean, it was just low level, flying by the boot of Italy. Yeah. It was just so exciting, and then landing and flying all the way there, back. Yeah. It was just for 6 weeks. I mean, red flag is pretty good too. I mean, there was a lot of, but that really sticks in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. No, what a fantastic experience. And at a young age, I mean, I'm so happy to hear that you were able to be a part of that. I mean, I'm sure that's a memory that you'll keep with you forever. Was there ever a moment where you thought, this is it, I'm done?
I remember I was pretty new in the B-52. I'd been there maybe like 3 months, and our first son, David Daniel, was due in May. Was going to be delivered in May. So it was in April, and we're flying this low-level mission, and a lot of times we did a lot of night flying. And at that time, you didn't really need a discernible horizon. And we did have a forward-looking infrared, but you needed some kind of moon or something to be able to see. But we're navigating at night, and it's the old avionics system. I had great navigators, a great aircraft commander. So my job would be to look at the low-level map that we had with different points and timing and heading and everything. And I had like a flashlight, the old Army flashlight with the red lens. Mm-hmm. And I'm making sure, I'm double checking everything. I'm like following, making sure everything's good. So we get to this halfway through, or 3/4 of the way through, we get to this one section. I'm looking, and like I had really good eyes at that time. And I'm going like, I think I see a mountain. I'm looking, I go, hey, I think I said, hey, radar or navigator, I see a mountain. And then the aircraft commander goes, no, this is flat and rolling. We're good. I go, I see a mountain. And then the radar navigator comes in and goes, pilot, climb into the world. He had a way of saying, into the world, because he couldn't see beyond the terrain. Into the world in 6 miles. Climb. And this is 52, so we're going like 330 miles, and we're climbing. He goes, into the world in 5 miles. Into the world in 4 miles. Into the world in 3 miles. He says, climb. And we got down to about 210 miles. And he goes, into the world in 1 mile. Continue the climb. And we cleared it. And then we aborted the route. I guess that the navigation system had some errors, and we landed, and we all kind of looked at each other, and we all knew we came close. And the radar nav, Herb McLean goes, Dave, when we debriefed, he goes, as long as you're on my crew, you never have to buy beer. I got that always. I want to live too. I mean, I got a young family. I don't want to, I'm not ready yet,
Yeah.
But that was probably the closest that I can think of that really, but it took the crew. I mean, and the aircraft commander was good, but he was like, no, we're good. But the radar also came back and said, no, we worked as a team to take the inputs, like they say, don't just blow them off,
Yeah.
So that was an eye opener for me. That was the closest call that I can recall.
Wow. I can only imagine after that, on the ground, and that's the part where you get off the airplane and you kiss the ground.
Yes, literally, it was going like, go.
Yeah. Now, what would if someone asked you, "Are you getting out at the right time?" What would you tell
them? I'm getting out at the right time. Well, I don't have a choice, right? But if let's say, I mean, it's an exciting time. I think it's an exciting time to be in aviation right now. I'll be honest. The last 2 years have, it's been tiring. Yeah. Trying, with the COVID and the masks and the people and everybody's on edge. It's not as much fun, as it was before. So, I think we all thought, like, in March of, 2020 when it started, we all thought, by the summer we'll be good, by the summer we'll be good. And we're still dealing with it, So I think it's a good time to get out. I mean, and it's also a good time to get in and stay in. So, I mean, that's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Yeah. No, that's actually very insightful. Yeah, because it's a good time to retire. It's not like it's all crumbling, but it's also a good time to get in. I think that's very, very wise, actually. Now, you have 3 sons that in some way, shape, or form have all either been in aviation or in aviation. What can you tell us about that?
I got to give a high five to my daughter because she's tough as nails, but she doesn't want to be a pilot. But she's an industrial designer. But for my 3 sons, they're very proud of all my kids. My oldest is David Daniel. He went through college, all this stuff. Then he joined the Army. He had this program called From the Streets to the Seat, flying a Kiowa, Jet Bell Ranger, close air support, with looking for IEDs and really supporting our troops with Hellfires and rockets and stuff. So that's a dangerous mission. And he deployed. He got his helicopter wings, and he almost died in Afghanistan. And so that was very traumatic. He's tough as nails. I'm proud of how he's fought back. I mean, he's a paraplegic, he lived through that. Both lived through the crash, but he got the brunt of it. And I'm very proud of how he's fought back. And the first time I heard his voice when, I came back, and he was in Germany in the hospital, and I called a nurse. He goes, "You got to call in a few more hours because he's sedated." So I called a few hours later, and I thought it was going to be the nurse again. So I go, "This is David Ortiz. Can you put the phone to my son, David Daniel's ear so he can hear me?" And he goes, "Dad?" And I go, "What?" He goes, Dad, I'm alive. And I remember going like, "God Almighty, thank God." And it was very dramatic. And he tells me, he goes, "Dad, I may not be able to walk after this." I go, "Well, how's your brain?" Because, he's really smart. He goes, "I think it's good." I go, and I kind of joked. I go, "Well, you're not dumber than dirt, so you're going to be okay."
Wow.
I go, "You're going to be okay." And then so he did that. Now, he's paralyzed, but he's still looking at possibly getting his private license through adaptive flying, which I don't know much about that. He's a little bit about that, but I'm very proud of him. He's a state representative at the House District 38 in Colorado. He went into politics. I told him it's a dirty business, but he's trying to do good stuff for the veterans and for the other people, for his constituency. So he's into there. Mike was a welder, working in welding. And also, when this stuff happened, it really was traumatic for the whole family, and different family members helped out. Michael he went out there with Dave in Colorado for about a year or so, and so did other family members and relatives, but David, he fought his way back. So Michael started his aviation career, and right now he's trying to work on a CFII. Matter of fact, I think he's going to have the check right at the end of December. Oh. So he's really excited about that. He lives here in Arizona, so I'm very proud of him, happy for him. Chris is our youngest. He's by far our youngest. He just turned 22. So he's got his commercial license, not commercial, but his private license. He's working on his tail dragger endorsement, and then he's trying to get his commercial. And Michael, I think, is going to go more the instructor route. I think Christopher wants to go more like just get into commercial. I don't know a lot about, it sounds kind of dumb, but I don't know all the intricacies of the civilian route as far as getting into it. Mm-hmm. I know the military route. So, they're working towards that goal. So it's very exciting, and I know when they study, I know we all know, like David and Michael, and we all know, and Chris, I know what it takes. And, they just, all of them have to be disciplined to keep pursuing it.
Yeah, it's tough. And, it's funny because the training to be a pilot, getting all that education down, taking all those certificates, all those licenses and exams, and it's like, it's also cyclical. Because there'll be times when you're like, oh, I'm getting it. I've got the money's here. I can afford to go get my flight instruction, and everything's working out. And then, okay, now this rating is complete, or something happens to my instructor, and now I got to kind of catch back up with a new instructor, or maybe money becomes tight. And so there's all these outside factors that very much prepare you for a career in aviation, just in the process of training for it. So I applaud your sons for getting into aviation and keeping with it. Now, you had mentioned that there's an organization that I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, semperfi.org, that really played a huge role in helping bring back and rehabilitate David into being able to come back from such an injury.
Yes, and that's a great organization, semperfi.org. They have very little overhead. They were rated like one of the top organizations to help in the wounded warrior. And it sounds like a Marine. It was formed by Marine mothers because they knew there was a need, and they serve everybody: Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, Coast Guard, and they do so much. My son can tell you so much about that, but I remember like my son's refabricating his house in Colorado, or renovating it to make it ADA capable for him. And they donated $50,000 for that.
Wow.
For that. And the Army was like, oh, I don't think we can let him have it at first. And then Mrs. Reed said, hey, Dave, I'll write you a check. It's going to mess up your taxes if they won't let him have it, and you can put it towards that. I go, I don't care. We'll make it happen. And finally, an Army captain said, you know what? This is crazy. He went to war. He was fighting for us. Now this organization wants to help him to get his house usable for him. We'd be remiss, we'd be negligent if we wouldn't let this happen. Come on. Yeah. So I'm glad common sense came at the end. But it's a great organization. They do a lot of work, and it's so important because there's some people with a lot of injuries, and there's some people that come back with a lot of PTSD, injuries that you can't see. And not only them, but also their families, their spouses, their kids. So many deployments over the last 20 years. Yeah. That's even some effects that we don't even know yet. And that's kind of scary. So this organization is very key.
Yeah. And you can find them at semperfi.org. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's the Marine Foundation of Indiana. It's a nonprofit organization that seeks to enhance the lives and support or provide support for Marines and their family members. The foundation will raise community awareness and efforts to provide financial assistance and moral support at home during activation and or deployments of Marines. But not just Marines, all active and service members.
Yes.
The foundation will work with other veteran and nonprofit organizations to support the Marine family. And they, like you said, need donations. This is the time of year. Cut back on your Starbucks cups and send a little bit. Every little bit helps. So you can make a donation right there on their website. Again, semperfi.org. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Well said, Tony. And I'd be remiss if I didn't, with that also, talking about like family members getting into aviation. I also have a nephew, Joshua Tejerina. He's also doing it, but he's got another successful career. So he's kind of looking into it. So, I feel very fortunate that, David Daniel did it. Michael, Thomas is doing it. Chris Ignacio, my son, youngest son's doing it. And also Joshua. So I just want to make sure I mention that. And
yeah. And it's amazing to hear too. I was so impressed that, a lot of captains that I fly with, I asked them, your kids and we get to talk, you have this getting to know you at 37,000 feet session, right? And so you always talk about family and children and
right.
Usually they go, either one of my children or they're interested, or one of my children is, working up their education in order to get into aviation. But to have 3 or 4 of your children all pursue that in one way, shape, or form, and having nephews and nieces and brothers and as well in the industry, you really are an aviation family. It's amazing to hear and so refreshing as well.
It is. I mean, they figured if Dad could do it, I could do it.
That's funny how that works. Now, what's the best advice you can kind of think of to pass along to any of them about aviation?
Okay, I would say, that's a hard one, Tony, but I would say, to me, I think be dedicated to your goal and be persistent. Be willing to work to get it, because it's not just like, oh, I'm a pilot now. We know what it takes, and you got to do the hard work. It's just like whether you're going to be, whatever you do, the hard work is in the practice, in the preparation. You need to do the book work. You may have great hand-eye coordinations, but you need to do the book work. Definitely. Be determined, dogged determination. You're going to have some obstacles, obviously, some setbacks, some things that you don't even expect, that's going to try to derail you. So be honest with yourself. If you want to do it, do it. Don't BS about it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah, it's a commitment for sure. And you got to be prepared to be 100% committed.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, a final few questions for you. Now, when you think back to a person that had the biggest impact on your aviation career, who would that person be, and what would you say to them?
Wow. That was, let me think, for aviation career. You know what? This is going to really seem like it doesn't quite fit. But I have to say that, when I was young, I wanted to be a pilot, but I thought it was all like, just coordination, you're coordinated, you can do good. And to tell you, I wasn't a good student my first 3 years of school. I was really interested in just playing, having fun. I mean, I was always good at math because it was numbers. I didn't really know English we didn't go to kindergarten, so I went to the first grade. But I had good eyesight. I didn't know I was cheating, but for spelling, they had the desk here. Okay, I had good vision, so I could really put it together. and I always had a stomachache, so I missed like 50 days in my first year. And my dad goes, "Just stay home," but my mom was, "This is wrong," and what happened is it was Father's Day when I was about 10 years old, going into the 4th grade. And, we had like a big dinner and stuff. We had like hot water and grease. My older sister I was running around the corner, like she couldn't see me, and she was just throwing this out there instead of putting it, in the drain. She just threw it out. For some reason, I was running around the house. Like, I don't know why I was doing this, like outside running laps around the house, and the water comes on me and it just burned me. I still have you can't see it, but I have a little scar there.
Oh.
Looks like a hickey, but it's not a hickey. But anyway, so my older sister, name's Lupe, she runs after me. She puts a water hose. So I'm sorry. I go, no. So she felt so guilty, I think, so bad that she always got books for me from the library, like John F. Kennedy, the first aviator pioneers, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, all these books that were like easy to read books,
Mm-hmm.
but it got me to read. So now I couldn't do my physical stuff. I mean, I was wrapped up like a mummy until school started, and they would pull the Band-Aids off and they would hurt.
Oh,
The doctor would pull, but that put me in the mode to be, dedicated, studying and working hard. So believe it or not, I mean, she's not a pilot, although she worked for Space Alliance and she worked with astronauts. She was like an office manager. She had some, and she put me, when I was a sophomore in high school, at the academy, she knew some of the engineers. So I was put in a space shuttle simulator.
Oh, wow.
So, so she's not a pilot, but she had a huge, along with my parents and my brothers and sisters, all of them, but she had a huge role. So I would say, God bless you, man. And it took something that was bad, but it turned out to be, maybe I would have been, like, oh, whatever, I'm not really interested in school. Who knows? Only God knows, right? But I would tell her, hey, thank you.
Wow, what a fantastic story. I mean, we mentioned it earlier, and I find myself kind of in the same position with all the wonderful aviators I've had the honor and opportunity to interview over the past few years. Is they all have some event that triggered some aspect of their career, their passion, their journey, and that's a very unique situation. And thank you for sharing that with us, because that's fantastic. Tell your sister thank you and good job, because of that moment, I actually have had the honor to fly with you a few times, and I met a wonderful captain who's getting ready to retire, and here we are on this podcast. So who knows if any of that would have happened.
Hopefully we'll get to fly again, Tony.
Yeah, we'll have to try to make that happen. Now, if you could go back just for a moment and whisper in your younger self's ear, what would you tell yourself?
Boy, it's going to work out. Relax. I mean, don't freak out. I guess, that's a very deep question. To tell you the truth, you caught me at a loss for,
I told you there'd be some surprises.
Totally, that's like a left hook. It's like, I don't, you got me there. I don't know what to say on that one.
Well, you said relax.
Yeah,
it's all going to work out, and I think it's funny because I often think these kind of things out, in the middle of just doing something, and all of a sudden I think, oh, what would I have told myself?
Right.
And it's very similar actually to that. Is yeah, of course, you give yourself the don't do this, or don't do that, or that whole Marty McFly. If your 5-year-old accidentally sets fire to the living room rug, go easy on it. Yeah. There's all those. Yeah, sure. But like in the simplest of terms, just it'll all be okay.
Right.
It'll all be okay. That comfort, that confidence that we all need to hear now and again.
That's a good one, Tony.
Yeah. Now, what are your plans after the water cannon salute?
I it's interesting because I hadn't thought a lot about it until like like around August. I started thinking about it, and I told myself, maybe I want to do this, or maybe I want to do a little bit of corporate, and then I started thinking. I go, do I really want to do that? I mean, I feel like, life's too short. You can never get time back. As we had the lost decade or whatever of aviation, you can never get time back. So I think I'm just gonna, right now, my plans are just to enjoy the family, do some traveling with my wife. Until I was gonna take her to Paris, and I go, yeah, I took her to Paris, Texas, but I've never taken her to. Never really. I mean, she went to England with me and Hawaii, and so I need to do that. I mean, I want that, maybe see Italy and France and Spain. And, we got a little place in Mexico, so we'll probably spend some time out there, spend some time with the grandkids and my brothers and sisters and my other relatives and my sons and daughter, Probably spend some time in Lawrence, Kansas.
That's you go.
But that's what I plan right now. But we all say about plans to never survive, contact with reality sometimes.
That's very true. But I'm looking forward to hearing about you enjoying yourself in the future here in the next, at least for the next 6 months, and then after that, whatever your journey takes you, or wherever it takes you.
Keep in touch, Tony.
Yeah. Good. Now, as our flight is drawing to an end, I would like to just say thank you for coming along on this journey with us. Captain Ortiz, it has been an absolute pleasure.
Excellent, Tony. Thank you for inviting me. It was, quite an honor to be, and then to have your Squawk Ident. That's awesome. I'm impressed.
Yes. Well, the honor is absolutely all mine. Now, a very special thank you again to Captain Dave Ortiz for sharing his journey. And please help us here on the show by sharing this podcast online and with your friends. It really does help us out. Be sure to subscribe and follow to the Squawk Ident podcast or wherever you're listening, whatever platform you're listening on. We love to hear the listener feedback. Recently, I've received quite a few emails and text messages from some of our listeners that have been really having success in their journeys in aviation, and whenever possible, I will share them with you, the listeners. You could also send us emails or even audio feedback via our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you will find audio archives, photos from the flight line, a guest book photos tab, and our Squawk Ident pilot shop, where you can find an assortment of t-shirts, hats, mugs, and much more. A small proceed from all those sales goes towards helping finance this podcast. You can also contribute to the Squawk Ident podcast financially right there from the homepage. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram users can also find us under the Squawk Ident podcast or Squawk Ident podcast. Also, a big final thank you to Captain David Ortiz for sharing his journey with us, and thank you to you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other. Bye, everyone.